Welcome to the English learning community. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another exciting episode. Today, we're diving into something truly special. A story that's not just going to improve your listening and writing skills, but also inspire you to take your English to the next level. So, grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and let's get started. From pauses to power. Unlocking natural English speaking, the struggle begins. Maria sat in the corner of the bustling cafe, her hands wrapped tightly around a cup of coffee. The steam rose gently, but her mind was far from calm. She stared at her notebook, filled with English words and phrases she had been practicing for months. Yet, every time she tried to speak, her words stumbled, her sentences broke, and her confidence shattered. Maria had moved to New York 6 months ago, from a small village in Mexico. Back home, she was known for her quick wit and her ability to make anyone laugh. But here, in this fast-paced city, she felt like a shadow of herself. Her English was hesitant, filled with long pauses and awkward silences. Every conversation felt like a battle, and she was losing. That morning, she had gone to a job interview. It was for a position as a receptionist at a small but busy office. She had prepared for days, memorizing answers to potential questions. But when the interviewer asked, "Tell me about yourself," her mind went blank. The words she had practiced so hard vanished. She stuttered, paused, and finally mumbled something incoherent. The interviewer smiled politely, but Maria knew she had failed. Now, sitting in the cafe, she felt tears welling up in her eyes. She thought of her family back home, who had sacrificed so much to send her to America. She thought of her younger brother, who looked up to her as his role model. And she thought of her dreams of building a better life, of helping her family, of becoming someone who could inspire others. But how could she inspire anyone when she couldn't even speak properly? As she sat there, lost in her thoughts, an elderly man approached her table. He had kind eyes and a warm smile. "May I join you?" he asked in a gentle voice. Maria nodded, quickly wiping her tears. The man introduced himself as Mr. Thompson. He was a retired English teacher who had spent decades helping people like Maria find their voice in a new language. As they talked, Maria felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this man could help her. Mr. Thompson listened patiently as Maria shared her struggles. When she finished, he leaned forward and said, "Maria, do you know why you pause so much when you speak English?" Maria shook her head. "It's not because you don't know the words," he said. "It's because you're trying to be perfect. You're so afraid of making mistakes that you freeze. But here's the truth. Fluency isn't about perfection. It's about connection." Maria looked at him confused. "What do you mean?" Mr. Thompson smiled. "Let me tell you a story. The story of the broken vase." Mr. Thompson began, "When I was a young teacher, I had a student named Anna. She was from Russia, and like you, she struggled with English. One day, during a class activity, Anna was asked to describe a picture of a family having dinner. She started well, but then she paused. She couldn't remember the word for vase. Instead of stopping, she said, 'The big glass thing on the table with flowers.' Everyone laughed, including Anna. But guess what? We all understood her." Maria smiled faintly. Mr. Thompson continued, "Anna didn't let that moment stop her. She kept speaking, even when she made mistakes. And over time, her pauses became shorter, her sentences smoother. She didn't focus on being perfect. She focused on communicating. And that's what made her fluent." Maria thought about this. "But how do I stop being afraid of mistakes?" she asked. Mr. Thompson leaned back. By changing your mindset. Mistakes aren't failures, they're stepping stones. Every time you make a mistake, you learn something new. And every time you keep speaking despite the mistake, you build confidence. He paused, then added, "Let me teach you a simple exercise. It's called Think in English." The first exercise, Mr. Thompson explained, every day take a few minutes to describe what you see around you in English. For example, if you're walking down the street, think, the sky is blue, the trees are green, the cars are noisy. Don't worry about perfect grammar, just think in English. Maria nodded, feeling a spark of hope. Maybe this could work. Mr. Thompson continued. Another exercise is to use filler words. Instead of pausing awkwardly, say, well, or, you know. These words give your brain a moment to think without breaking the flow of conversation. Maria practiced right there in the cafe. Well, I like coffee. It makes me feel warm. She laughed nervously, but Mr. Thompson nodded encouragingly. See, you're already improving, he said. The journey of practice. Maria left the cafe that day with a renewed sense of purpose. She decided to follow Mr. Thompson's advice and started practicing the Think in English exercise every day. At first, it felt strange. Her thoughts were slow, and she often struggled to find the right words, but she reminded herself of Mr. Thompson's words. It's not about perfection, it's about progress. One morning, as she walked to the park, she began describing her surroundings in English. The sun is bright, the birds are singing, the children are playing. She stumbled over the word children, but instead of stopping, she said, "The little ones are playing." She smiled to herself. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. At the park, she noticed a group of people practicing yoga. She sat on a bench and continued her exercise. The woman in the blue shirt is stretching. The man next to her is balancing. The instructor is speaking softly. She felt a sense of accomplishment. For the first time, her thoughts in English felt natural. But Maria knew she needed more than just thinking in English. She needed to speak. So, she decided to join a local English conversation group she had heard about. The group met every Saturday at the community center, and it was free. Maria was nervous, but she reminded herself of Anna's story. Mistakes are stepping stones, she whispered to herself. The first conversation group. On Saturday morning, Maria arrived at the community center. The room was filled with people from different countries, all eager to improve their English. The facilitator, a cheerful woman named Linda, welcomed everyone and explained the rules. "This is a safe space," she said. "We're here to learn, not to judge. So, don't be afraid to make mistakes." The group was divided into pairs, and Maria was paired with a young man named Ahmed from Egypt. Ahmed smiled warmly and said, "Hello, how are you?" Maria hesitated for a moment, then replied, "I'm good, thank you." "And you?" Ahmed nodded. "I'm good too. What do you like to do in your free time?" Maria felt a pang of nervousness. She wanted to say, "I like to read books and watch movies," but the words didn't come out smoothly. Instead, she said, "I like, reading and watching films." Ahmed smiled. "That's nice. I like movies too. What's your favorite film?" Maria's mind raced. She wanted to say, "The Pursuit of Happiness," but she couldn't remember the English name. Instead, she said, "It's a movie about a man who works hard for his son, with Will Smith." Ahmed's eyes lit up. "Oh, I know that movie. It's very inspiring." Maria felt a wave of relief. Despite her pauses and mistakes, Ahmed had understood her. And more importantly, he hadn't laughed or judged her. For the first time, Maria realized that people cared more about the message than the mistakes. The turning point. Over the next few weeks, Maria attended the conversation group regularly. She practiced speaking with different people, each time gaining a little more confidence. She also continued her Think in English exercises and started using filler words like well and you know to keep her conversations flowing. One day, Linda announced a special activity, storytelling. Each person had to share a short story about their life. Maria's heart raced. She had never spoken in front of a group before. But she remembered Mr. Thompson's advice: focus on connection, not perfection. When it was her turn, Maria stood up and took a deep breath. Well, I want to tell you about my first day in New York, she began. Her voice was shaky, but she kept going. I was very nervous. I didn't know anyone, and my English, was not good. She paused, but instead of stopping, she said, You know, I felt like a fish out of water. The group chuckled, and Maria smiled. But then I met a kind man in a cafe. He told me mistakes are okay, and now I'm here with all of you, and I feel, more confident. When she finished, the group applauded. Linda smiled and said, Maria, that was wonderful. You didn't let your pauses stop you, and your story was very inspiring. Maria felt a surge of pride. For the first time, she realized that her struggles were not weaknesses. They were part of her journey, and every time she spoke, she was getting stronger. The power of persistence. Maria's progress wasn't overnight. There were days when she felt frustrated and wanted to give up, but she reminded herself of her dreams and the people who believed in her. She continued practicing, learning new words, and pushing herself to speak even when it was uncomfortable. One day, she decided to apply for another job. This time, it was at a small bookstore. The owner, a kind woman named Mrs. Carter, asked her, Why do you want to work here? Maria took a deep breath and said, I love books. They, help me learn English, and I want to help others find books they love too. Mrs. Carter smiled. That's a wonderful answer. When can you start? Maria couldn't believe her ears. She had done it. She had spoken confidently, despite her pauses, and it had worked. A new beginning. Maria started her new job at the bookstore the following week. The smell of old books and the quiet atmosphere felt like a sanctuary to her. Mrs. Carter was patient and encouraging, often engaging Maria in conversations to help her practice. Tell me about this book, she would say, handing Maria a novel. Maria would describe it as best as she could, sometimes stumbling over words, but Mrs. Carter always listened with a smile. One afternoon, a customer approached Maria at the counter. He was an elderly man with a gentle demeanor. Excuse me, he said, do you have any books by Gabriel Garcia Marquez? Maria's heart skipped a beat. She knew the author well. His books were famous in her home country. But the name was long and difficult to pronounce in English. She took a deep breath and said, Yes, we do. Let me show you. She led the man to the literature section, her mind racing. She wanted to say, He's one of my favorite authors, but the words felt heavy on her tongue. Instead, she pointed to the shelf and said, Here, Garcia Marquez. His books are, magical. The man smiled. Yes, they are. Have you read 100 Years of Solitude? Maria nodded eagerly. Yes, I love that book. It's, about family and time. And magic. The man's eyes lit up. You've described it perfectly. It's one of my favorites too. As they talked, Maria realized something important. The man didn't care about her pauses or her imperfect grammar. He was just happy to share his love for books with someone who understood. That conversation became a turning point for Maria. She began to see her pauses not as weaknesses, but as moments of connection. The unexpected challenge. One day, Mrs. Carter announced that the bookstore would host a small event, a book reading by a local author. "Maria," she said, "I'd like you to introduce the author to the audience." Maria froze. "Me? But my English—" Mrs. Carter placed a hand on her shoulder. "Your English is just fine, and this will be a great opportunity for you to practice speaking in front of a group. You can do it." Maria felt a mix of excitement and fear. She had come so far, but the thought of speaking in front of an audience made her stomach churn. That night, she called her brother back home. "What if I mess up?" she asked him. Her brother laughed. "Maria, do you remember when you taught me how to ride a bike? I fell so many times, but you never gave up on me. You kept saying, 'Try again, you'll get it. Now it's your turn. Try again, Hermana. You'll get it.'" His words gave her courage. Maria spent the next few days practicing her introduction. She wrote it down, read it aloud, and even recorded herself to hear how she sounded. She practiced in front of the mirror, imagining a room full of people listening to her. The big night. The night of the event arrived. The bookstore was filled with people, and Maria felt her hands trembling as she stood at the front of the room. She looked at Mrs. Carter, who gave her an encouraging nod. Then she took a deep breath and began. "Good evening, everyone," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "My name is Maria, and I work here at this bookstore. Tonight, we have a special guest. She is a local author, and her new book is very beautiful." She paused, feeling the weight of the silence. But instead of panicking, she remembered Mr. Thompson's advice. Use filler words to keep the flow. She took another breath and continued. "Well, her book is about love and family. And, it reminds us that life is full of surprises." The audience smiled, and Maria felt a wave of relief. She finished her introduction and stepped aside as the author took the stage. After the event, several people came up to Maria to compliment her. "You did a great job," one woman said. "Your introduction was heartfelt." Maria beamed with pride. She had done it. She had faced her fear and spoken in front of a group, pauses and all, and no one had judged her. They had only seen her effort. The ripple effect. Maria's confidence grew with each passing day. She continued to practice her English, not just at work, but in every aspect of her life. She started watching English movies without subtitles, listening to podcasts, and even writing short stories in English. She joined online forums where she could chat with people from all over the world. Every mistake became a lesson, and every conversation became an opportunity to grow. One day, a new member joined the English conversation group. Her name was Lena, and she was from Vietnam. Like Maria, Lena struggled with pauses and hesitations. During the group discussion, Lena barely spoke, her face filled with frustration. After the session, Maria approached her. "I know how you feel," she said gently. "I used to, pause a lot too, but it gets better. You just have to keep trying." Lena looked at her with hopeful eyes. "Really? But I feel so stuck." Maria smiled. "I felt the same way, but now I can speak. Not perfect, but better. And you will too." From that day on, Maria became a mentor to Lena, sharing the tips and exercises that had helped her. She realized that her journey wasn't just about her own growth. It was about helping others find their voice too. The final lesson. One evening, Maria visited Mr. Thompson at his home. She wanted to thank him for the guidance that had changed her life. As they sat in his cozy living room, Maria said, "You helped me so much. I don't, pause as much now, and I feel more confident." Mr. Thompson smiled. "I'm proud of you, Maria, but remember, fluency isn't just about speaking without pauses. It's about expressing yourself and connecting with others. And you've done that beautifully." Maria nodded, her eyes filling with tears. "Thank you for everything." As she left his house that night, Maria felt a deep sense of gratitude. She had come a long way from the girl who sat in the cafe, crying over her coffee. She had faced her fears, embraced her mistakes, and found her voice. And she knew that her journey was just beginning. The funny twist. Maria's journey had been filled with challenges, growth, and heartwarming moments, but life, as she had learned, always has a way of surprising you, sometimes in the funniest ways. One sunny afternoon, Maria was working at the bookstore when a little boy, no older than 7, walked in with his mother. The boy had a curious look on his face as he browsed the children's section. Maria approached him with a smile. "Hi there. Can I help you find something?" The boy looked up at her and said, "Do you have any books about, dinosaurs?" Maria's eyes widened. The word dinosaurs was one she had struggled with for weeks. She had practiced it in front of the mirror, repeating it over and over until she thought she had it down. But now, faced with the pressure of saying it correctly, her mind went blank. Yes, we have books about, the big lizards from long ago," she said, gesturing wildly with her hands to mimic a dinosaur. The boy tilted his head, confused. "You mean dinosaurs?" Maria's face turned red. "Yes. Dinosaurs. That's what I said, right?" The boy giggled. "You said big lizards." Maria laughed too, realizing her mistake. "Well, they are big lizards, aren't they?" The boy's mother joined in the laughter. "You're right about that, but I think he's looking for something a bit more specific." Maria led them to the dinosaur section, still chuckling at her own mix-up. As she handed the boy a book about T-Rexes, she said, "Here you go. This one is about the, king of the big lizards." The boy grinned. "You mean the king of the dinosaurs?" Maria pretended to gasp. "Oh, right. Dinosaurs. I keep forgetting that word. Maybe you can teach me?" The boy nodded seriously. "It's easy. Just say dinosaurs. Like this. Dinosaurs." Maria repeated after him, exaggerating the word just as he had. "Dinosaurs, got it. Thank you, teacher." The boy beamed with pride, and his mother laughed. "Looks like you've got a new language coach," she said. As they walked away, Maria couldn't stop smiling. She had spent so much time worrying about her pauses and mistakes, but this little boy had reminded her that language and life is supposed to be fun. Sometimes the best way to learn is to laugh at yourself and keep going. The celebration. A few weeks later, Maria decided to throw a small party to celebrate her progress. She invited her friends from the English conversation group, Mrs. Carter, Mr. Thompson, and even Lena, who had become one of her closest friends. She baked cookies, decorated the bookstore with balloons, and prepared a short speech. When everyone had gathered, Maria stood up and said, "Thank you all for coming. I want to share something with you. When I first came to New York, I was, very scared. My English was bad, and I thought I would never improve. But because of all of you, I've found my voice." She paused, not out of hesitation, but to let her words sink in. "I learned that it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to pause, and it's okay to, call dinosaurs big lizards." The room erupted in laughter. Mr. Thompson raised his cup of tea and said, "To Maria, the queen of big lizards." Everyone cheered, and Maria felt a warmth in her heart. She had come so far, not just in her English skills, but in her confidence and her ability to connect with others. The life lesson. As the party wound down, Maria sat with Mr. Thompson and Lena, reflecting on her journey. "You know," she said, "I used to think fluency was about speaking perfectly. But now, I know it's about, being yourself. And sometimes, that means laughing at your mistakes." Mr. Thompson nodded. "That's the best lesson of all, Maria. Language is a tool, but laughter is universal." Lena added, "And you've taught me that too. I'm not so scared anymore. I know I'll get better, just like you." Maria smiled. "We all will, as long as we keep trying and laughing." And with that, Maria raised her cup of coffee, toasting to her journey, her friends, and the many big lizard moments yet to come. If you enjoyed today's story and found it helpful, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an episode. We've got so many more inspiring stories, practical tips, and fun lessons coming your way to help you master English and boost your confidence. And hey, if you're feeling extra motivated, leave a comment below and tell us, what's one mistake you've made while learning English, and what did you learn from it? We'd love to hear your stories and cheer you on. Thank you so much for joining us today. Remember, every step you take is progress, and we're here to support you every step of the way. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep believing in yourself. You've got this.